Hi there, these comments are for GB and I am Michael, the founder, owner, and the materials writer for all of your lessons at the 7-step system to pass a TOEFL IBT, and you just completed an integrated writing practice test, specifically integrated writing number 17. And you are one of my TOEFL writing bootcamp students. So I'm going to go ahead and read and error correct your entire essay. So my first impression, and I'm just getting ready to work with the essay right now, is 3.5 out of 5, 22 points out of 30. Now, by the time I get to the end of this error correction video, I may increase or decrease that score slightly. But for my first impression, this is where we're going to start. So I think if we look at the rubrics here, maybe you can make a little bit more complete explanation of some of the points in the lecture and show how they relate to the reading. You have a few minor error correction things too, right? Now you'll notice on the right here I have the reading passage and the lecture. On the left I actually have your essay right here, right? So that's what we're working with right now. So maybe we can start first of all with the introduction. So you say the reading passage or the reading states that human, and because it says induced here, you might say caused instead, so use a synonym. So human-caused global warming is a severe effect which lately caused, and it does say, it says in 2002, probably lately is not the best word, so you might say which several years ago caused an enormous ice sheet collapse in the Antarctica, the largest over the last 30 years, and several conclusions can be drawn from this dramatic incident. The professor states that you might say something like here, however, the professor states that we should not jump to conclusions so fast and gives reasons and explanations opposing, you might say, some points in the reading passage. Okay, in the next paragraph we have first, the reading states that the collapse of the 200-meter, the collapse of the 200-meter ice shelf, which is 3 times bigger than Hong Kong, is a strong indicator that the polar ice caps are getting warmer. Exactly. One more, according to the speaker. You might say, in fact, according to the speaker, and I'm taking this idea, 0.6 degrees centigrade over the last 150 years. Temperatures have risen 0.6 degrees centigrade I'm going to say the last century and a half. Now, what I would do here is, it's good when you get to the listening that you have some type of transition word that shows how the information is different. So in contrast, the professor opposes this idea. Now let's go to the lecture. Let me make sure you've covered the most important ideas here. So it says, suggest a new cooling of the Antarctic between 1966 and 2000, which is what you have, right? So in contrast, the professor opposes this by claiming that researchers, let's get this, that University of Illinois researchers what if we get rid of all those words? Let's make this a little more concise. In contrast, the professor claims that University of Illinois researchers show that Antarctic has experienced a cooling of, and how much is it? degrees centigrade between 1966 and 2000. Which is good. You might want to say which are facts that contradict the rise in global warming as the reading states. I think that's good. I think we have it. So let's look at this one more time. So first, the reading states that the collapse of the 200-meter ice shelf, which is 3 times bigger than Hong Kong, I'm going to look at this as additional information here. It's a strong indicator that the polar ice caps are getting warmer. In fact, according to the speaker, temperatures have risen 0.6 degrees centigrade over the last century and a half. In contrast, the professor claims that University of Illinois researchers show that Antarctic has experienced a cooling of 2 degrees centigrade between 1966 and 2000. Moreover, some regions appear to have cooled between 1986 and 1999, which are facts that contradict the rise in global warming as the reading passage states. Okay, so now we're ready to take a look at your next paragraph. This paragraph, you say, second, the reading posits, good vocabulary by the way, that don't need to put 2 that's in there, that ice shelves in the polar regions have been retreating as is evident from this example. As it evident from the, I'm going to clarify this, the example of the Antarctic B ice shelf collapse. So, as is evident from the example, the Antarctic Larsen ice sheet collapse. This is where you have your problem here. You can't join 2 independent clauses together, right? You might want to, this is something like, let's create a new sentence here. In addition, now if you're not sure what I'm talking about here, go to Google, what is a comma splice in academic writing? Those are your key words. So in addition, the greenhouse emissions associated with the melting of ice shelves have been causing the sea levels to rise. I'm going to put on the other hand in there. The professor, on the other hand, contradicts his statement by stating that recent, not founds, but findings. This is a word choice issue here. Found, you have find, found, found. So found is the past participle or simple past form of the verb find. If you want to change it into a noun, you have to say findings. Or you can say research, something along those lines. Now we're going to go over to the lecture here. So it's saying the professor, on the other hand, contradicts his statement by stating that recent findings have shown that the West Antarctic ice sheets may be getting thicker, not thinner. And where does it say that at? You got the West one, you see the Antarctic. I'm looking in here, we have yeah, right here. So the West Antarctic ice sheet have shown precisely the opposite trend, maybe getting thicker. Also, he claimed that some regions of the Antarctic are getting warmer, and some, maybe you might say parts, are getting cooler in the recent years, explaining probably don't have to use in this way, just explaining that, let's put a little connector word in there, thereby explaining that Antarctic has many climates. And I think that's pretty good. Now, what you didn't say here is, I think this idea is important. It says the collapse of the Larsen B ice sheet floated over the sea, not the land, so it did not cause the sea levels to rise at all. You might say Antarctic Larsen ice sheet shelf the speaker suggests that its melting did not cause sea levels to rise since it was floating over the sea. Not the land. You can probably say something like that, and I think we have it. So I think this is important. This idea, I think you probably don't want to leave out. All right, let's take a look at this paragraph one more time. So second, the reading posits that ice shelves in the polar regions have been retreating, as is evident from the example of the Antarctic Larsen ice sheet collapse. In addition, the greenhouse emissions associated with the melting of the ice shelves have been causing the sea levels to rise. So because we mentioned this idea about the sea levels to rise here and the retreating of the ice sheets, it's important to show how the lecture relates to both of those points, not just one of those points. So that's why I'm adding, so in addition, the greenhouse emissions, so the professor on the other hand contradicts maybe these statements by stating that recent findings have shown that the West Antarctic ice sheets may be getting thicker, not thinner. Also, he claims that some regions of the Antarctic are getting warmer and some parts are getting cooler in recent years, thereby explaining that Antarctic has many climates. Finally, at least in the case of the melting of the Antarctic Larsen ice sheet shelf, the speaker suggests that its melting did not cause sea levels to rise since it was floating over the sea and not the land, this observation contradicting the point made in the reading passage. Notice here, to avoid the comma splice, I said this observation contradicting. I didn't say contradicted. I could have said which contradicted the point made in the reading passage, but I'm trying to show different types of sentence styles here for you. All right? In this next paragraph, we have third, the reading states that greenhouse, on this one, let's put gases in there, must be reduced to prevent further harm to the environment. Yes, exactly. There's not very much from the reading, right? So you can't really do much more than that. The only problem I'm having here, be careful that you don't use exactly the same sentences from the reading passage, right? That could cause you some trouble. You're trying to show that you have knowledge of what's called synonyms. You can use similar words that are similar to what you have read or what you've listened to, not exactly the same, and that's what you're getting into, what's called paraphrase and summary. Okay, so there's not really much to do with the reading, but the listening is very big, right? So let's see what you said here. Let's make sure you have all the most. The professor claims, and I'm going to put another signal word in here. Conversely, the professor claims that the collapse I don't even know why you put that in there, because that idea about it floated over the sea, not the land, that's a point that focuses on that second idea, not the third idea. Am I right? So it looks like you had some trouble organizing your notes a little bit on this one, so let's look over here. No, he's saying here that it says, I'm not convinced that there's a direct connection between gas emissions from automobiles, industry, and virtually everything else and global warming. Right? That's the idea. So this is how you want to start here, is right here. The professor strongly claims as a conclusion he's not convinced, you want to say here, of the direct connection between gas emissions from cars, industry, to everything else with enormous growth warming. No, with global warming. You might want to say to support this conclusion, and then you want to combine this idea here. The professor And why is he stating this? He's saying that he's trying to argue that the warming and cooling is more of a natural cycle that the earth goes through and has nothing to do with what man is doing. So it said it's 10,000 years. It says therefore it may not be too long. To support this, he reasons or states that the current glacier age is 10,000 years old, and that no how does he say it here? You can say era has lasted for more than 12,000 years. We're overdue for another ice age. And maybe if global warming persists, I'm going to say, how about continues? It is likely to delay, you might want to say, are going into another ice age, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, I think we have it here, right? I would put this in here. The cooling and warming of the earth results He doesn't say that exactly, but it can be inferred that that's why he was giving this example, so I put that in there. So in other words, according to the speaker, the cooling and warming of the earth results from naturally occurring cycles of the earth and are not connected to man-made influences. And then maybe, if you wanted to, you could probably put a conclusion in there. It's not necessary. In the final paragraph, if you want to have a conclusion, you could say something like this. To sum up, the reading and the listening passage, maybe say passages, have differing opinions when it comes to the causes of global warming. And that's probably it, right? Okay, now let's go through it one more time. Let's see what we have. So we're going to make, let's make a few more corrections. So first, let's do a quick spell check. Now let me do a word count. Let's see how we have here, how many words we have. Okay, so we've got 485. That's probably a little bit too much. Okay, let's do spell check. Change. Change. Ignore. Okay, let's look at it one more time. Here we go. So overall, my impression is, I think you're very close to 24 points, but I'm gonna put you a little bit lower than that on this one, about 22. But you have the idea of how to structure the essay. That's an important thing. So you say the reading states that human-caused global warming is a severe effect which several years ago caused an enormous ice sheet collapse in the Antarctic, the largest over the last 30 years, and several conclusions can be drawn from this dramatic incident. However, the professor states that we should not jump to conclusions so fast and gives reasons and explanations opposing some points in the reading passage. First, the reading states that the collapse of the 200-meter ice shelf, which is 3 times bigger than Hong Kong, is a strong indicator. What if you say, change up the words a little bit here, indicates strongly that the polar ice caps are, how about this? Instead of using getting, be a little more concise, are warming. In fact, according to the speaker, temperatures have risen 0.6 degrees centigrade over the last century and a half. In contrast, the professor claims that University of Illinois researchers show that Antarctica has experienced a cooling of 2 degrees centigrade between 1966 and 2000. Moreover, some regions appear to have cooled between 1986 and 1999, which are facts that contradict the rise in global warming as the reading states. Second, the reading posits that ice shelves in the polar regions have been retreating. Maybe here just put as is evident from the example of the Antarctic Larsen ice sheet collapse. In addition, the greenhouse emissions associated with the melting of the ice shelves have been causing the sea levels to rise. Now, this is one of the reasons I did not give you a 3.75 out of 5. Because you talked about the melting of the ice shelves in the reading passage, but you didn't address that point as you discussed the lecture. So you say the professor, on the other hand, contradicts these statements by stating that recent findings we can probably, we can get rid of a lot of this. How about this? I'm trying to make the writing a little more concise. The professor states that recent findings have shown that the West Antarctic ice sheets may be getting thicker, not thinner. Also, he claims that some regions of the Antarctic are getting warmer and some parts are getting cooler in the recent trends, thereby explaining that Antarctic has many climates. Finally, at least in the case of the melting of the Antarctic Larsen ice sheet shelf, the speaker suggests that its melting did not cause sea levels to rise since it was floating over the sea and not the land. This observation contradicting the point made in the reading passage. Third, the reading states that greenhouse gases must be reduced to prevent further harm to the environment. Conversely, the professor strongly claims that as a conclusion, let's look at strongly. Let's get rid of some of these unnecessary words. The professor strongly concludes he is not convinced of the direct connection between the gas house emissions from cars, industries, everything else to do maybe say this. We're between A and B, so between emissions, industry, and everything else, and global warming. To support this conclusion, the professor states that the current glacier age is 10,000 years old, and that no interglacial era has lasted for more than 12,000 years. Thus, according to the speaker, we are overdue for another ice age, and if global warming continues, it is likely to delay our going into another ice age, which is not necessarily a bad thing. In other words, according to the speaker, the cooling and warming of the Earth results from naturally occurring cycles of the Earth and are not connected to man-made influences. And then we have our conclusion. To sum up, the reading and the listening passages have differing opinions when it comes to the causes of global warming. We got it. Now, what do I say now? What are some things that I think you want to do in order to do a little bit better here? One of the things I think you have to do better with, I think, is your vocabulary and your grammar usage. It's hard for you to summarize and to paraphrase other people's ideas, right? So what you do is you tend to use similar sentences or exactly the same vocabulary as you re-explain the ideas, and it's too close to the original source. But you do put in the voice markers. It's very clear when you're talking about the reading passage, and it's very clear when you're talking about the lecture. So that's a good thing that you're doing. Now, to address this issue, I really think that you need to expand your vocabulary a little bit more, and that will help you it will give you a better range of vocabulary that you can use to re-explain other people's ideas. That means for you, my TOEFL vocabulary lesson number 4, number 5, and number 6. Those are very good for you. And the better and the higher your vocabulary becomes, I think the easier it will be for you to do the integrated writing task. All right? And thank you for doing this writing practice test.